Another year has come and gone, and you know what that means? That's right, it's time to look at the best games of 2025, and we've got a whole bunch of them this time. It wasn't as spectacular a year for video games as 2023 was, but I'd say it was a pretty big improvement over 2024, and unlike that year, I managed to play most of the biggest games this time. Like 2023, it felt like we were getting at least one new banger every other week, though 2025's lineup was certainly a lot weirder, less focused on industry titans, and more on bringing up B and C tier series into the spotlight, along with some exceptional new IPs. It says something that GTA 6 was delayed to 2026, and yet it didn't feel like we were missing its presence thanks to the sheer quantity and quality of games we got. We could all use a bit more positivity right now, so let's go! If you know me, you know I prefer my video games to be, well, gamey. Not to say I can't love games that are more cinematic or story-focused, but I would much rather spend a game's runtime playing it than watching it, which makes it all the more surprising that I liked Dispatch as much as I did. This game just kind of popped up out of nowhere. I remember looking at my YouTube recommendations one day in November and suddenly seeing it everywhere, and I went, what's this? This looks cool. My heart sank a little when I saw it was an adventure game, meaning it's basically an interactive movie a la The Walking Dead, but I still wanted to check it out, and it ended up being better than I thought it would be. Let me make this clear. Dispatch does have gameplay outside of the choose your own adventure dialogue trees. It's just not the focus. Your character, Robert Robertson, aka Mecha Man, serves as mission control for a superhero team, and as the title implies, you dispatch them to stop crimes, save people, etc. via your computer screen. It's pure real-time strategy, requiring quick thinking and keeping track of which superhero would be best for the current situation while monitoring their cooldowns. It's fun enough, and can get pretty hectic at points, but we all know that's not why you're playing the game. Like other adventure games, the main draw is the narrative and characters. The cutscenes look great, with a very appealing art style full of bright colors and stylish character designs, making everything pop off of the screen. This cast of characters is really fun, and all have a good amount of depth to them, helped out by great voice acting across the board. The writing's pretty great, knowing exactly when to be serious and when to have fun, and the humor got more giggles out of me than the last 5 years of Marvel movies combined. I wouldn't call the narrative groundbreaking or anything. The idea of a Z-tier dysfunctional team bonding isn't new at all, but the top-notch writing and great characters make it one of the best examples of this trope in recent years. And since this is an adventure game, your dialogue tree choices affect the narrative and Robert's relationships with the other characters. It's not as expansive as Baldur's Gate 3 or anything, but the changes are meaningful enough that replaying the game to see the other options is actually pretty enticing. Dispatch is about as good as this kind of game can get in my opinion, but these interactive movie games still aren't really my thing, so this is as high as it goes. Now, if you give me a fighting game where you can actually play as these characters, then we'd be in business. Let me destroy people with Malevola and her big-ass sword. It would be awesome, I tell you. Few game franchises have had as strong a comeback as Doom. Many of you might not know or remember this, but before the 2016 reboot, Doom was not in a good spot. After Doom 3 released in 2004 to divisive reception, the series kind of fell off the face of the earth for over a decade, with only the not very good movie released in that time. But then Doom 2016 came in swinging with its high-octane running and gunning, and it was awesome. Then Doom Eternal followed it up in 2020, and it was even better. Now we have Doom The Dark Ages, a prequel, and it's pretty great. I do think this is the weakest entry of the three post-reboot Doom games, but don't take that the wrong way. This game is still a blast to play. Setting the story in the Dark Ages is a really neat idea that works quite well with the whole fighting demons premise, and while there's still a good amount of sci-fi mixed in as you'd expect from Doom, they take full advantage of the medieval setting with its locations, and of course giving Doom Guy a shield and an awesome fur cape. Combat's a little different. While shooting, ripping and tearing into demons still feels as awesome and satisfying as ever, there's less emphasis on mobility than before. Doom Guy feels more like a tank this time, using his shield to ram into enemies and throwing it like Captain America, and it feels great. There's a lot more weight to your attacks, making for some of the most visceral kills the series has seen yet. You can also pilot giant mechs, which is definitely more style over substance, but come on, this is pretty awesome. Mick Gordon sadly couldn't return to make the music after his falling out with id Software, but the soundtrack is still full of hardcore headbangers that add to the sense of catharsis when you're tearing demons to shreds. The story, it sure is there. Yeah, but who plays Doom games for the story anyway? We are starting to reach the point of diminishing returns with modern Doom, but I really appreciate that id Software tried to make all three games stand apart from one another, and I feel they succeeded. Again, The Dark Ages is my least favorite of the three, largely because I find the run and gun and jump and shoot mindsets from the 2016 game in Eternal more engaging than stand and fight from this game, but this is still a really great Doom game that I had a blast playing. Sometimes annihilating demons with a gun that shoots shredded up skulls is all a game needs. Oh my god, it's finally here! After 6 years of waiting, Hollow Knight Silksong has finally come out, and despite not playing much of the original Hollow Knight, I got sucked into the Silksong hype train. So, did it live up to expectations? Yep. I wouldn't call Silksong the best Metroidvania I've ever played, but for what it sets out to do, it pretty much knocks it out of the park. The art design is just as wonderful and atmospheric as the original, the setting is very bleak while still being colorful enough to not be outright depressing. Hornet controls very well, platforming and attacking feel completely natural, though I do wish her default walk speed was a little faster, and with upgrades, you can do some really cool stuff. I love how organic the level design feels. A lot of Metroidvanias feel like a bunch of biomes smashed together with little transition, but Silksong's map feels like an actual place where everything feels like it belongs. And these bosses are just so cool. Not only do they have great designs, but they are all very challenging and fun to fight. I died a lot, but most deaths felt like they were my fault, rather than the game pulling something stupid out of its ass, which is exactly what you want from a difficult game like this. Silksong is hard, very hard, but it's the fun kind of hard that makes you want to keep trying until you overcome that latest challenge. It's a fantastic game. So why isn't it higher? It's more of an it's not you, it's me kind of thing. I've said this before in other videos, but 2D exploration isn't something I'm all that good at. I like that Silksong allows you to get lost, but that also means I found myself looping around areas over and over again trying to find a new path and getting frustrated when I couldn't. And while I love the challenge of the boss fights, having to make the trek back to them every time you die does get exhausting when the closest bench is 5 or so minutes away. I can absolutely see why most would rank Silksong higher. I imagine many of you would have it at the very top, but I did get tired of it after a while and dropped it. It's still a great game, and the fact that it took so long to come out because Team Cherry was having so much fun making it instead of actual development problems is the feel-good story of the year. It's even getting free DLC, which is really awesome. Apparently it's coming out this year, but I'll believe it when I see it. Patience is the key, after all. Guys, Sonic is actually back, and it still feels so weird to say that. We've had 4 good Sonic games 4 years in a row, and as someone who became a Sonic fan in 2016, I have no idea what to think. But if that means we can get a great Sonic kart racer that can genuinely compete with a new Mario Kart, I will gladly take that. I played the open betas for Sonic Racing Crossworlds before the game came out, and I saw a lot of potential in it. Now that the game is out, I'm happy to say it delivered on said potential. To me, the most important elements of a kart racer are controls and track design, and thankfully Crossworlds gets both right. The driving controls definitely feel more loosey-goosey than previous Sonic racing games, more like an arcade racer, but it gives the game a more chaotic, fun feel. The tracks in this game are mostly really fun. There are a few, like Mystic Jungle and Blizzard Valley, that are annoying because of their gimmicks, but the majority of them, like Colorful Mall, Pumpkin Mansion, Coral Town, and Aqua Road, have great design that work very well with the controls. And then there's the Crossworlds themselves, which replace the typical second lap of each track, serving to spice up the race. And tracks like Kraken Bay, Hidden World, Dragon Road, and Galactic Parade are right up there with the best of the regular courses. It's a really fun gimmick that does a great job giving this game its own identity. The character roster is also really solid, including the mainstays we all expect, alongside the Babylon Rogues returning from the Riders games, and a few oddballs like Zaz, Sage, and the Egg Pawn. What's even cooler is that every character has multiple interactions with every other character, doing more to flesh all of them out than the rest of the series. This game made me give a crap about Zaz and Charmy Bee. How did they do that? The music's also great, but that's no surprise, it's a Sonic game. I do have a couple of complaints though. As cool as the Crossworlds mechanic is, playing the game for a while means you'll be seeing the same Crossworlds a lot due to the fact that they're all randomly selected, and after you race in each one once, you can get other normal tracks in the rotation for some reason. The item balance, while improved from the betas, can still be pretty annoying, and there's no way to turn items off. I'm looking at you, Slicers. And the DLC is pretty half-baked. While it's great to see more Sega characters show up for free, and the crossovers from Minecraft, Mega Man, Pac-Man, and Nickelodeon are kinda cool, none of them have voice acting, so they feel more like fan mods than an official product. But that's basically it for my criticisms. I do still prefer Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. I think that game's gimmick of the stages themselves transforming makes the tracks more memorable and has better flow, but Crossworlds is still a fantastic racing game that I will definitely return to every now and then when I get bored of a certain other kart racer that may or may not show up later in this video. Gotta keep up that competitive spirit, right? Remaking a game is incredibly tricky. I've had remakes on my previous best game lists, and those remakes felt like new games that happen to follow the premise and structure of old classics. They don't attempt to replace the originals, but they stand alongside them as great games in their own right. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater doesn't really do that, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. MGS3 is one of my favorite games of all time, and as a straight remake of the PS2 game, Delta does just about everything right. Kojima may not be working with Konami anymore, but you could tell how much love the developers have for the original. Every area has been painstakingly recreated with insane detail. They look exactly how I picture they would look in HD, and the character models also look fantastic. But they decided to keep the story exactly the same, complete with the old voice lines from the PS2 original. And while it feels a little weird to hear them come out of these much higher quality models at first, it goes to show just how iconic and memorable Snake Eater's script and voice acting is. Also, after 20 years, we finally found out who Eva's VA is. Ariel from The Little Mermaid. But redone graphics aren't enough to make a remake great, and thankfully Delta adds some much needed touch-ups to help Snake Eater feel more modern, in a good way. While you can still play with the classic controls and camera, there's now an option to play with more modern controls a la MGS5, including bringing over crouch walking from Snake Eater 3D, yes, that was a thing, and over-the-shoulder aiming. There's quite a few quality of life improvements, like being able to pause and fast forward codecs, being able to swap camouflage and call your team like how you switch weapons instead of having to go into the menu, and having a checklist in the cure menu, which makes doing the individual steps to heal injuries way easier. Something really cool they added was that Snake's healed wounds now remain as scars on his character model, which was supposed to be in the original, but was cut because of technical limitations. Other than those things, yep, this is Snake Eater alright. This is a tricky one since it's a very faithful remake of one of my favorite games, and straying too far from the original might lose what made it so great. But I do wish Delta did a little bit more, especially since the Silent Hill 2 remake from the previous year hit a really nice balance between old and new. MGS Delta doesn't, so this is as high as it goes on the list, unfortunately. It's still an amazing game that's a must-play for anyone who loves the video games and video game stories. So if you've never played Snake Eater, definitely give either the original or the remake a shot. You'll be in for quite a thrill. After 11 years, we finally got a brand new mainline Mario Kart, and people's opinions on it seem to be mixed. Well, I do have some gripes myself. I think Mario Kart World is yet another great entry in this series, and I'm gonna tell you why. Like I said with Sonic Racing Crossworlds, the most important element of a kart racer are the controls and track design, and Mario Kart World excels at both. Drifting feels a lot tighter than Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and while it took me a little time to get used to after spending, 2,000 hours in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it feels so smooth now. What's even cooler is the new driving mechanics, as they actually change up the gameplay in much more interesting ways than gliding or anti-gravity did before. The charge jump feels like a much more balanced version of wheelies from Mario Kart Wii, since all vehicles can do it, and while wall riding and rail grinding seem a little simplistic at first, they open up so much room for shortcuts and alternate paths, and all three combined to give this game the highest skill ceiling of any Mario Kart, while still being accessible for casuals like always. And the track design is top notch. Most of them take advantage of the new mechanics to make for some of the most satisfying racing experiences I've ever had. Whistle Stop Summit, DK Spaceport, Great Question Block Ruins, Boo Cinema, Dry Bones Burnout, the list goes on. And the retro tracks have been spiced up even more than they were in 8, with some of them like Wario Stadium, Peach Beach, and Dino Dino Jungle being borderline unrecognizable and way more fun to play. The character roster is huge, with all the mainstays being greatly upgraded with much more expressive models and tons of awesome costumes that admittedly make the select screen a big mess, as well as a bunch of quirky enemies like Goomba, Pokey, and everyone's favorite Cow. I know some people don't like random enemies being playable, but they're wrong. The Koobalings may not be here yet, but I'm fine sticking with Best Girl Daisy in her adorable vacation outfit. You just can't beat the beret. Then there's, ostensibly, the game's selling point, the open world. I do agree with some of the criticisms, like it would be great if we were rewarded for exploring with more than just a tiny sticker to slap onto your cart that you could barely even see, but I've actually come around to really liking it. Going for a completion isn't sure, but just playing in 10 or 15 minute bursts and doing a few P-switch challenges has honestly been quite fun. It's less a big open world to feverishly look for everything, and more of a hub to chill out and drive around while listening to what's easily my favorite soundtrack of the year, and considering the competition, that's impressive. There's 227 brand new arrangements of classic Mario Kart and mainline Mario songs, songs that can play in the open world and between racetracks, and they are all insanely good. I'm kinda dreading that eventual Nintendo Music video when Mario Kart World comes to the app. It's going to be over an hour long, I guarantee you that. Grand Prix tries to incorporate the open world to mixed results. I like that we get to see how all the courses connect to each other, but that also means we only get to drive one lap around the actual track, and the routes are definitely not as interesting as the courses themselves. But Knockout Tour turns that weakness into a strength, as participating in an elimination-based race around the world makes the drives through routes much more frantic and intense, and some of the most fun I've had in a Mario Kart game. But as I've said before, I have a couple more gripes. Battle mode has reverted to just balloon battle and coin runners again, and while I like that the maps are seamlessly integrated into the open world, these maps are just too big, even for 24 drivers. There's no option to play 3-lap races online for some reason, even though making a separate lobby for those wouldn't be difficult to add, and using the Kamek item for unlocking characters is really dumb and luck-based, and I don't know why this was a thing they added. A few other complaints I had were fixed by patches, like the initial lack of custom items and markers for collectibles in the open world, but there is still some work to be done to make this game the best it can be. It's a shame, because if it didn't have these problems, this could have been my game of the year, and I mean that. But I still love Mario Kart World. It's easily my most played game of 2025, and I will continue to play it for years to come. Worth $80? Oh god no, but a fantastic game nonetheless. Now if you had the Koopa Links as free DLC, then we'll talk. Co-op games appeal to me a lot more than they used to. I remember playing New Super Mario Bros. Wii with friends, and while co-op there wasn't a disaster or anything, it did feel like most deaths were the result of people causing the screen to scroll too far or accidentally throwing others into pits, rather than the stage design itself. But more recent games have made co-op not only completely manageable, but more fun and engaging than if the game was made for just one person. I've heard really good things about Peak, but that game's only on Windows, and I bet you can guess who's stuck with a Mac laptop. Instead, I chose Split Fiction for my co-op game of 2025, and boy am I glad I did. This game is the work of Hazelight Studios, the devs behind A Way Out and It Takes Two. So these guys are the top of the class when it comes to co-op experiences. I haven't played those games yet, but if they're half as good as Split Fiction, I definitely need to try them out. There is genuinely more creativity in the first hour of this game than most AAA games' entire runtime. Our playable writers, Mio and Zoe, are trapped in a simulation of their own writing ideas, so that means we get a bunch of crazy scenarios to travel through. One minute you're running atop a flying train in a cyberpunk setting battling cyber ninjas, the next you're transformed into pigs that use rainbow farts to fly around and get turned into sentient sausages, and that's just scratching the surface. The game is always changing things up. Every segment is just long enough to squeeze every ounce of fun out of an idea and switch to something else before said idea gets stale. This is the kind of game that can be every type of game all at once, and not only not turn into a complete mess, but have it be really fun and make sense given the premise. But it's the co-op experience that really elevates Split Fiction this high up on the list. I played this game with my best friend, and though we weren't always in sync, working together to solve puzzles and overcome challenges was really satisfying, much more so than if this was a solo experience. We had a blast riding sand sharks down a desert slope, passing a bomb back and forth on a game show, and having a dance-off with a Monkey King. It also helps that you can't impede each other's progress, eliminating the main problem a lot of multiplayer games have. While the fact that you need another person to play with does make Split Fiction less accessible than others, the game being designed completely around co-op makes it far more memorable than it would have been otherwise. The more multiplayer games that won't make you want to kill your friends, the better. It's always fun to look at my most anticipated games videos at the end of a year to see how my picks have turned out. Some didn't quite live up to expectations, some did, and some went above and beyond and ended up being even better than I expected. Such is the case with Clair Obscur Expedition 33. In that video, I said I hoped Expedition 33 would push turn-based RPGs forward, just like how Persona 5 did a decade ago. So did it? Yes, and then some. If anything, I clearly underestimated how excellent Sandfall Interactive's debut game would turn out, because Expedition 33 crushed it in every way. The visuals may be realistic looking, but the game's aesthetic is stunning, with a colorful, painterly look to the environments that's jaw-dropping at every turn, proving you don't need a $200 million budget to make realism look gorgeous. Graphically and artistically, this is one of the best looking games I've ever played, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Expedition 33 is a turn-based RPG, directly inspired by games like classic Final Fantasy, but it has action commands like a Mario RPG. Not for everything. Standard attack attacks are automatic like you'd expect, but skill attacks and everything during the enemy phase make use of timed button presses, which in my opinion is a lot more engaging than watching your party members attack and being forced to take hits. The timing is pretty strict, especially on parries, making the game a lot harder on normal difficulty than a Mario RPG, but because you can theoretically dodge or parry every attack, battles always feel fair, though pretty punishing if you mistime your inputs. It's easily my favorite combat system in any turn-based RPG. Expedition 33 is very tightly paced, and while this does mean it's shorter than most RPGs, it also means it's almost completely lacking in the bloat that plagues a ton of AAA games. The game is linear, yeah, but it's not Final Fantasy XIII. There are still plenty of extra paths to explore and find things like chroma or expedition journals to reward your sense of curiosity. The tight pacing also applies to the story, which, while not perfect, is emotionally powerful with excellent world building and a relatively small but wonderful cast of characters, acted to perfection by their French mocap actors and English voice actors. There's a reason 3 of them were nominated for Best Performance at the Game Awards. It's one of the best English dubs I've ever heard. And that's not even getting into other elements like the amazing soundtrack, the wild boss fights that admittedly go on a bit too long, and the fact that all this was done on a fraction of the budget that AAA games have. I know people are tired of all the praise Expedition 33 gets, especially after it swept the Game Awards, but I'm sorry, it really does deserve the accolades. So why isn't it at the top of the list? I don't know. To be honest, the top 3 are all very close to each other, so this order could theoretically change next week. I guess I just had a little more fun with the next 2 games. But don't let that take away from how big a triumph Expedition 33 is in virtually every way. It's a brilliant RPG that does a fantastic job paying tributes to its inspirations that came before and paving the way for those who come after. I remember before the Switch 2 Direct last April, everyone was predicting we would get a new 3D Mario game. It made sense. It had been 8 years since Super Mario Odyssey, and while Bowser's Fury was wonderful, it was technically a side game attached to 3D World's re-release. So we were all waiting for Mario's next big adventure, especially after Super Mario Bros. Wonder spiced up the 2D games. We didn't get that new 3D Mario. We got something even cooler. Donkey Kong Bonanza is exactly the shot in the arm the Donkey Kong series needed. It's been 11 years since Tropical Freeze, but Bonanza makes it feel like the series never left. This isn't DK64 2. This isn't Donkey Kong Country in 3D. This is a whole new style of Donkey Kong, and it fits him like a glove. Instead of pure platforming or collecting, Bonanza is all about destruction and using your environment in creative ways to make platforming and collecting bananas more interesting. DK controls great. He's not quite as versatile as Mario and Odyssey, but he feels powerful and heavy like he always does, and now he has a skill tree to unlock more moves as you collect more bananas. But if you want to, you can beat the game without getting a single banana, as progression is tied to linear story beats instead of collectibles, unlike DK64 or most 3D Marios, which is really cool. It encourages you to play the game how you want, which is something I always appreciate. The ways you collect bananas are just as varied as moons in Mario Odyssey, from finding them in underground caves, to completing fun challenge courses that sometimes call back to the rare DKC games, to getting creative with your chunk jumps. The actual layers you go through to reach the planet core are very memorable. They aren't all winners, like who remembers the landfill layer, but others like the canyon, forest, resort, tempest, and feast layers are among the coolest in any Donkey Kong game. Enough that I feel a little bad to tear them apart. But not too bad, because destroying everything is just the most addictive thing in the world. DK feels so strong in this game. Smashing everything in his path is really satisfying, and it's pretty wild just how much of every level you can break, which only becomes more fun with the Bonanza transformations. DK has never really had power-ups before, but transforming himself into other animals is a really creative way to go about them. I didn't find much use for the Zebra Bonanza outside of mandatory sections, but the rest are stupidly fun, though quite broken. I even kinda cared about the story this time, where DK and Pauline, who's a kid for some reason, form a cute little friendship as they journey to the planet core. It's not much, but the bond they form already pushes it beyond what any 3D Mario game has ever done with its partners. There are a few little issues, like the frame rate sometimes takes a dip whenever too much is happening on the screen, and the camera is noticeably more wonky than recent 3D Marios due to the destructibility of these levels, but all is forgiven by the endgame, which is one of the wildest in any game I've ever played, and blows the finales of every other game on this list out of the water. Do I like Donkey Kong Bonanza more than Super Mario Odyssey? No. But that's a top 5 game of all time for me, so the possibility of Bonanza being better was very small to begin with. But is it the best Donkey Kong game? You know what? It might be. DKC2 and Tropical Freeze are also amazing, but Bonanza is something wholly new and very special. Honestly, I'd be fine with 3D Mario and Donkey Kong running in tandem with one another from now on. Going bananas has never been this appealing. 2025 has been a spectacular year for indie games. They've never had a bad year, but most years there's only one or two indies that ever get into the Game of the Year conversation. But 2025 has several that have stood toe-to-toe with the big guys. I already talked about Dispatch, Hollow Knight Silksong, and Expedition 33 if you count it as indie, but none of them were my favorite indie of the year. For that, we have to descend to the land of the dead for Supergiant Games' latest masterpiece, Hades 2. The original Hades was already a standout title when it released in 2020, and that year was pretty packed with awesome games, so the fact that it managed to stand toe-to-toe with games like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Ghost of Tsushima is very impressive. It was so awesome that Supergiant Games decided to make a sequel, which they've never done for any of their games before, and well, they knocked it out of the park. Like the first game, Hades 2 is a roguelike dungeon crawler with a classical mythology coat of paint, but instead of Zagreus, you control his sister Melinoe, an adorable sweetheart who's just as capable and kick-ass as her brother. And yes, Zagreus and Melinoe are both actual characters from Greek mythology, in case you were wondering. The combat is very snappy and satisfying, even more so than the first game, and while all the weapons have their uses, I stuck with the Sister Blades as my weapons of choice, since while they have no range whatsoever, they hit fast and hit hard. I just have to play more carefully. Clearing rooms gives you rewards like health upgrades, power-ups, or special boons given by the Olympians, which are extremely helpful, most of the time. It is so gratifying when you annihilate a room full of enemies, and very punishing if you screw up badly on a boss. Remember, this is a roguelike, meaning if you die, you lose all progress and have to restart from the crossroads, losing all your boons. But because it doesn't usually take too long to get back to where you were, it never feels as aggravating as it otherwise could be. That age-old mentality of just one more run is in full force here, and it makes for a truly addicting game. But that's all stuff from the first game. So what does Hades 2 do to improve from its predecessor? Well, it does what every great sequel does: expand on everything. The game has been doubled in size. You not only go down into the underworld, you can also visit the surface and head up to Mount Olympus, with another set of awesome, challenging bosses to overcome. The character roster has been expanded, including the few Olympians missing from the first game like Apollo and Hestia, but also giving Melinoe a bunch of new companions to join her like Hecate, Odysseus, and Nemesis. The story is much bigger in scope, as Melinoe and the others have to deal with the return of Kronos, the leader of the Titans, before he and his armies conquer the world. The soundtrack is bigger and even better than before, the art style and design are just as wonderful as ever, and everyone is insanely hot once again. The voice acting is great, the difficulty is just right. Hades 2 is just so damn good. Does it even do anything wrong? The true ending is kind of disappointing. That's it. Otherwise, this game is basically perfect. I'm confident in saying that Hades 2 is now my favorite indie game, and a strong contender for the best game of the decade so far. It's not a massive epic that tries everything and succeeds at everything like Baldur's Gate 3, but Hades 2 is the epitome of what a video game is to me. Hats off to you, Supergiant Games. Good luck topping this in the future. There we go, those are the best games of 2025. You know, when I played Donkey Kong Bonanza back in July, I was pretty confident that it would be my game of the year, but then I played Hades 2 and Expedition 33 and suddenly I wasn't so sure anymore. And in the end, Hades 2 won out. But again, Expedition 33 and DK Bonanza are also fantastic games that push their respective genres forward, so maybe the order of the top 3 will shake around in the coming years. But what do you think? Would you have switched around the order of the top 3? Do you think Sonic Racing Crossworlds is better than Mario Kart World? Am I just bad at Hollow Knight Silksong? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you with my most anticipated games of 2026, which should be out pretty soon. Bye!